Nintendo is pretty excellent at a lot of things, keeping a stock of franchises and characters that after decades of peddling out, people still want to see, innovating in gameplay and control interfaces constantly, getting away with artificial digital scarcity, making sure that you can't deal with the Yakuza in any capacity if you work with them. But perhaps their greatest strength is accessibility. Nintendo games are famous for their pick-up-and-play nature, with easy-to-understand premises and controls, but deep mechanical underbellies that reward players who want to push the game to their limits. While this is most obvious with their action and platforming titles, Nintendo's remained a reliable hand at translating more initially complex and mechanically daunting genres to a mass market. Turn-based RPGs and real-time strategy games were made into multiple different series with far more accessible gameplay, while the racing genre was made easier to grasp in ways both traditional and subversive. All of these games are incredibly easy to play, but require dedication and care to truly be a master of, and also Gen 6 of Pokemon. But perhaps most interesting is Nintendo's approach to fighting games. Fighters are notorious for appearing incredibly inaccessible, a barrage of pretzels, mind games, developed lingo, and astonishing feats of execution seeming overwhelming at a casual glance. While fighters are infinitely rewarding and far more understandable once you get in, getting past the initial button-mashing phase is a tough one. And yet, Nintendo was up to the task. They created a title that was easy to understand, incredibly appealing visually, pushed the system it was on to its known limits, and didn't sacrifice any depth to reach its appeal. It's inviting, it's patient, it's celebratory of everything that came before while injecting its own personality, twisting the mechanics of the fighting game genre just enough to be more lenient on newcomers, but still addicting enough to go round after round on. It is. Joy Mech Fight was released exclusively for the Famicom on May 21st, 1993. In many ways, it was destined to fail as a commercial product. Released 2.5 years after the Super Famicom launched, and developed mainly by Koichi Hayashida and Koichiro Eto before they were even hired by Nintendo, it was more fortuitous timing than anything that the game was even released at all. But from that lack of commercial drive comes the chance for innovation, and just creating a game that gets the absolute most out of its system. Joy Mech Fight is a miracle for the Famicom, featuring beautiful backgrounds hosting absolutely massive fighters whose lack of limbs come from abusing the limitations of the console's technology. Flying body parts mean that each limb can be counted as an individual sprite, then stitched together into a chimera of working pieces, not unlike the towering boxers of Punch-Out or the technical innovations that would later bring Rayman to life. But more important than it somehow working and looking this good, it played fantastically. Nary a bit of slowdown in sight for a silky smooth fighting experience worthy of a far more advanced console. Joy Mech handles just as well as its clear inspiration of Street Fighter II. Every punch with a satisfying crunch, every blow you land to another bot just feeling right. And from this base, the game decides not to merely be funny robot Street Fighter II. It decides to carve out its own identity, be its own fighting game, and appeal directly to the Famicom player base. There are a couple key differences between Joy Mech Fight and your standard fighter. The game doesn't have rounds so much as it gives each combatant 3 health bars to work with, similar to Killer Instinct's 2-bar system. Awesome! Score a down, and the winner's health bar regenerates slightly. This fosters a more aggressive playstyle, as even if you're behind in a given round and in a bad position, every blow landed on an opponent adds up to help mount an eventual comeback, as well as to give the winner of a close round breathing room so as to not be immediately overwhelmed by a foe hungry to bring the match back to even. But perhaps the most drastic change is that there are no walls in Joy Mech Fight. Cornering your opponent is simply impossible, stages scrolling infinitely in both directions. This does remove a lot of inherent pressure that a character like Zangief would exude, slowly trying to lure you into helplessness before real Soviet damage destroys your puny free market body. But in exchange, keeps players out of a lot of hopeless situations. The obvious defensive strengths that the Infiniscroll opens up are then complemented by the aggression that the health system invites, creating a back and forth where rushdown and defensive play are woven in and out of at the tip of a hat. There's always a chance for a turnabout in Joy Mech Fight, in just its base mechanics. But not content to rest on its laurels, the game decides to go, okay, so if you can always run away, what if we gave everyone huge range or burst movement options? And it's in character special moves that Joy Mech Fight really finds its footing. Each character possesses 4 special moves, most including a universal grab, to play with on top of relatively standardized normals. To simplify things for new players, none of these moves use diagonal inputs. Sure, you get a half circle forward here and there, but you can tap the D-pad quickly instead of needing a smooth swipe, something that the stiff Famicom controller really appreciates. These simplified inputs mean that special moves come out fast and constantly, and in Joy Mech's case, that's a good thing. The most damaging moves tend to be locked to charge inputs, holding back for a second before launching forward with an attack. But your quick bread and butters can be thrown out with reckless abandon. However, well-timed jumps or patient blocks waiting for a counter throw can easily thwart a projectile spammer or reckless striker. All mechs feature super disjointed hitboxes, with their torsos and heads being the only spots in their bodies containing hurtboxes, making counter hits incredibly safe and getting caught by a stray pixel incredibly unlikely. By combining supercharged specials with super safe normals, Joy Mech gets at the heart of what makes a fighting game so great. The art of reading your opponent and blowing them up for their mistakes, almost effortlessly. You will be able to respond to your opponent's tells. It will feel good, and you can get back to optimal fighting range in a second to go and finish the fight. But of course, that's when you've figured out your character, the controls, and how to play, right? Fighting games always sound great until you have to sit down, play them, and figure out exactly how the buttons work together. And it's not like Joy Mech Fight will let you skip the line and learning what suits you best, and oh wait, it totally does! Included with every single character is a tutorial, teaching you how to do their special moves, and even illustrating exactly when to push buttons to make sure they come out. Not only that, but it features a training mode to practice your inputs on, something that Street Fighter itself wouldn't adopt until over 2 years later. You wondering which character to main? No problem. The story mode pits you against 7 foes who you unlock after beating, letting you see them in action, see their strengths, and exploit their weaknesses before you earn the right to scrap with them yourself. It's the Mega Man system applied to a fighting game, and it's brilliant, making each one a reward to play, inviting you to use each one you unlock to take on the next until you click with one and find a favorite. And speaking of characters, how many do you think are playable in the game? Go ahead, leave a comment if you're feeling cocky, and remember, it's a Famicom fighting game. What'd you guess? 8, maybe 12 to match Street Fighter 2? 16 if we're really pushing it? Well, okay, sure, you start with 8. But then you beat hard mode and you unlock 24 more. Beat special mode, and you unlock the 4 bosses for a total of 36 fighters on a Famicom game. Sure, 8 of them are recolors with only a handful of changes, albeit more than most Smash Echo Fighters get. But even if you discount those, that's still 28 super fighted robots. Smash wouldn't pass that number until 15 years later. The fighting game genre as a whole wouldn't surpass that until the King of Fighters 98, and it's a huge step up from Nintendo's last fighting game, which had a roster of 2. And they were the same guy. And he sucks. Joy Mech Fight does absolutely everything it can to endear itself to as many players as possible without trivializing its depth like something like Dive Kick. It creates an environment where any player can mount a comeback with just the right moves. It teaches the fundamentals of the game's controls and gives the player a safe environment to play with them in. It gives the player a Mega Man-like boss select and has them earn fighters like powers before offering a massive reward in exchange for mastery. It knows the limitations of the system it's on and its controller, and works around them in order to create the best experience possible. And most importantly, it creates a cast of characters whose personalities match their fighting style, and builds an incredibly fun roster of weird war machines that ensures, no matter their playstyle and likes, every player will find someone to enjoy. And nowhere does the game's personality shine brighter than with its main character, Sukapan. Originally programmed to be a comedian, Sukapan was retooled hastily into a fighting machine to defeat his evil reprogrammed robot brethren and stop the chaotic ambition of the evil Dr. Wildnuts. And as you'd expect from a comedy robot, his moveset is suitably goofy. Limbs flying way far out from his body.
Watch they go.
His forward punch is literally tripping over himself.
Clumsy boy.
He throws his head at foes like a projectile.
Liliitis.
He's even got this goofy cartwheel that makes him go flying.
I hate Mondays.
But all of his dumb, floundering moves play into Joy Mech Fight's strengths and come together to create a deceptively deep and creative character. Tripping over himself keeps Sukapan's body low to the ground.
Delicious pancake.
And his super disjointed kicks likewise keep him leaning back, protecting his vulnerable head and body while approaching. His Tandecker projectile has the same startup animation as his Konaniran headbutt, which makes for a clever mix-up when he can use the headbutt as a half-screen teleport by holding forward during the move.
Nothing personnel, kid.
Of course, that's only useful when he has room to use his slow projectile, which is exactly what the Sukapan roll is for. Even though it's a charge move similar to E Honda's headbutt or Balrog's dash straight, it actually keeps Sukapan away from the opponent, the rhetoric slick robot bouncing off of his foe to a full screen distance,
Not today, Satan.
regardless of if they block or not. If he totally whiffs, Sukapan goes tumbling to the other side of the screen, mixing the opponent up while resetting neutral. Oh, but you want more options? Want to chase him down? Sukapan can hop during his roll to halt his momentum, leap up halfway through to try and read an opponent's jump, or even activate it in the air to use the move as a makeshift dive kick.
Demon Cradle.
Combining all of this with the fact that there are no walls to ensure that he can always run away, and all of Sukapan's moves combine to make an infuriatingly defensive character. When able to almost effortlessly get himself out of a jam and keep an opponent at bay until he finds the right opportunity to deliver his punchline. And all of this with nothing more complex than an easy charge input, one that already ensures that he'll be blocking and ready to take on what the opponent throws at him. This combination of depth and character spreads to the rest of the cast as well. My boys Tiger and Leo possess lightning-quick jumping knees that leap them across the screen, but if executed from a crouch, they can do a short hop leap, putting them in prime position for a suplex follow-up. Ghoston is the reanimated shell of the second boss, Ra, learning from its mistakes and adding more projectile and zoning tools to a character who initially had a bunch of strange rushdown options. The hastily made Bok Bok is clearly modeled after Sukapon, but has more erratic attacks that favor him being closer to the opponent, losing out on the annoying subtlety of his base for a more aggressive clowning. Zack sucks, with super predictable 0G kicks, so he's rebuilt for a rematch as Super Zack, taking all sorts of quick and nasty techs from other robots to truly prove himself. Gibbers low to the ground and grins like he knows he's a cheap bastard. Shenlong has a Frame 1 invincible dragon punch to live up to his namesake. His name is Old! In spite of its utterly massive roster, Joy Mech Fight is able to infuse its cast with a huge deal of personality through nothing but gameplay identity and design. Moves are reused between characters, but putting them on different builds and with different combinations makes each of them stand out and appeal to a different kind of player. They're not all balanced, no. Gaian's dash is not okay for how safe it is. Whoever thought Ai's half-screen good punch should also be an anti-air is nuts, and Ho-Oh is just blatantly better by being a final boss. But most of the cast is close enough in ability and feel good enough to play that there's definitely someone here for everyone. And most importantly, you can go through each of them, fight against each of them, figure out where you struggle, and pick a healthy stable of favorites quickly and easily. The small differences breed familiarity with the entirety of the cast. The joy of learning a new main happens so quickly in Joy Mech Fight, and the feeling of wanting to carry them from game to game, get in one more quick match, learn just how to overcome a rough matchup or what secondary might counter it. It's incredible how rapidly, yet how wonderfully JMF pulls it off. And it's such a shame that this fantastic game is buried in the annals of history. The documents giving Nintendo legal ownership of Joy Mech Fight were allegedly misplaced until 2007, preventing Sukapon from appearing as an item in Super Smash Bros. Melee, or in any capacity greater than a sticker in Brawl. Outside of re-releases on the Virtual Console and Japanese Nintendo Online service, and Sukapon appearing as an assist trophy in Smash Ultimate, Joy Mech Fight as a whole has virtually no impact on the gaming landscape. And considering just how much the game gets right, how incredible of both a technical achievement and a fighting game it is, Sukapon and his friend's position is just sad. Nintendo would release other fighting games, Kirby Fighters 2 providing a fun-filled smackdown on Popstar, Killer Instinct being great until they gave it to Rare in the divorce, and the Smash Bros. Series needing no introduction. But while these are all fantastic games, I don't think that they achieved the same success that Joy Mech Fight does at being an accessible fighting game. Kirbo's a fun time, but was built more off of the Star Allies engine and rebalanced from its beat-em-up roots, rather than developed with fighting in mind from the word go. ARMS is a great adaptation of boxing into a 3D arena fighter, but is very hyper-specialized in its niche, and thus takes a lot of patience and effort before you can access its secret sauce. And while Smash Bros. Has an incredibly deep and rewarding competitive scene that continues to evolve, the transition from it being a fun competitive party game and a highly competitive brawler with tons of positioning and momentum-based nuance is an incredibly rocky one. Joy Mech Fight introduces players not just to the novelty of characters, but to the fun of movement, of attacking, of playing a fighting game, bringing the skill floor infinitely closer to the skill ceiling than its contemporaries. It doesn't teach you the basics and then set you loose to hopefully figure out the deep end. It instills a love of the genre into players, eases you in with familiar video game progression, and lets you discover your favorites organically. I know it's not likely that this title will ever see any kind of resurgence past really niche admiration, but hey, if I got someone to try out this game and they really like it, or just made someone care about cute Robot Man a little bit more, that'd be really cool. Because Joy Mech Fight deserves more than just a nod as the Nintendo fighting game before Smash that didn't suck. It's a technical marvel, an accessible impossibility, and the best pure fighting game Nintendo's ever made. It is absolutely peak design.